So yeah, let's start. Have any of you attended this session before? Mostly new guys only, I think, right?
Yes.
Okay. So guys, you must have come across terms like PRD, product requirement document, or Jira ticket, or product roadmap. How do you track these things? How do you document? What are the right approaches? So usually when you're working in a team which has developers who kind of will work independently on coding whatever feature that you have ideated, the manner in which this is communicated to them is via a document known as a product requirement document or something called a user story. It's never verbal because, say, you keep it on a verbal level with a developer that, oh, I have a feature idea where this will happen when the user will click this, and then that will happen, and these are the different scenarios to handle. It's unlikely the developer will remember everything. He might remember the core idea of the feature, but what's going to happen is that he's going to come and ask you again and again on how to handle things. But ideally, what you should be doing is you have to document all these different scenarios and cases in your PRD itself. So they can simply refer that PRD whenever they have a question. And if there's something which isn't mentioned in the PRD, then they will approach you asking their doubts and whatever comes to their mind. Also, we'll cover Agile, Waterfall, Scrum, all of these concepts which are used in startups and corporations these days. So let's take a look at this Agile and Waterfall methodology. I'll give you some examples on how you can understand what is Agile or what is Waterfall. So if we take a look at Waterfall first, right? If you look at the bottom here, it says the project starts here and it ends here. So when a project starts, there is a requirement which is ideated on, the design is made, it's implemented, it's verified, it's maintained, and finally the project ends. This usually happens over a large time duration, I would say a year or maybe more, or 6 months. But Agile is different. Instead of a huge time span during which all these 5 steps are done, Agile makes smaller projects, which is done across that same time duration. So if we look at the image above over here, these same 5 steps, they've been done in one sprint. And then again the 5 steps happen, and again the 5 steps happen, and so on and so forth. So instead of a long process of making something, you make it in chunks. So you're releasing things faster, but also you're learning faster because you have shipped something out within a week or a month rather than waiting 6 months or a year. So how this is beneficial is that because you are releasing something faster, you can get feedback from your users or customers very quickly. And then you can release a new version of your product again, which has improvements or it has fixes which were not there in your, let's say, first rollout, which was there. That's why it's called or termed as agile. It allows you to be very flexible in your approach. Because say in the first week or your first, say, product version, you figure out, okay, this is not working. But you know what's the great part? You didn't invest a year into making that. You probably invested a few weeks. So you can pivot and do something completely different now and then try that and see if that is working. So that agility is only available when you break your entire project into these small chunks, which we call sprints in agile methodology. Are you guys with me so far or any questions over here?
No question, sir.
Okay. So now some examples of waterfall. So one popular example I always give is imagine a AAA game like a Call of Duty or a Tomb Raider game or any racing game like Forza. Producing a game, designing a game, making a game, it's never a small project. And they can't even do it in a small project. So this is often done across a year or longer. So they figure out the story behind the game, what will be the artwork, what will be the design, and so on and so forth. And then they take one whole full year or a year and a half and they continuously develop it. And then they ship out the software. Similarly, older, let's say early 2000s or 90s, how software was bought or even sold, you would get these boxes of Microsoft Office, which would have a CD, and then you would install it, and then you'll have that version of Microsoft Office or Photoshop or any other software, which has been developed over a year. And every year they would come out with a new version or like that. So they spend a large time duration and then finally they ship a product. But the learning is not happening over there because they only end up learning something after a year has been spent. So things are much slower in terms of implementing learnings. Now, compare on the flip side, a application which comes out on your mobile apps, something like Cred, Swiggy, Zomato, any of your applications which are there, right? You can roll out a version of the app, and within a week or 2 weeks, you can roll out a second version of the app again, and you immediately implement your learnings within those 2 weeks. So it's giving you flexibility in terms of how often you can deploy, how often you can implement your learnings in products, how often you can resolve customer feedbacks or complaints, which Waterfall does not allow. But now, gradually, what we have observed is that a lot of these software companies, not games, but other softwares like Photoshop, Office, and all these guys, they are also gradually moving to agile methodology, and they keep rolling out updates again and again. And you don't really get, no one buys CDs anymore. It's all done online. Everything is sold online now. Everything is purchased online now. So you can roll out whenever you want. You don't have to worry about supply chain or anything. That being said, some products, waterfall methodology is required. Like I said, a huge project like a video game, definitely. Or even if you start out a product from scratch, it's probably going to be impossible to make a product within a week or two or even a month. It might take slightly longer, but it's never going to be as long as a year. You could still roll out some MVP form of the product within a few weeks or a few months. Whereas waterfall, everything is much longer. The entire cycle is much longer. So here's a small definition of agile that we have here. The ability to create and respond to change in order to succeed in an uncertain and turbulent environment. Now, let me shed some light on this, right? Think about it. Waterfall, you maybe plan out a project or product that you want to release. Let's say we're talking about Microsoft Office, maybe. Okay. Maybe in the year 2000, you are a product manager, you have to roll out the latest version of Office 2000. You have a year to actually develop it, test it, and add some bug fixes, and then finally release to market. Now imagine in the middle of the year 2000, Google comes out with its productivity suite. It's a hypothetical scenario. They came out with their own productivity suite. Okay. So now all of a sudden, you have to go back to the drawing board because what you've done in 6 months, it might not be relevant anymore. And you were going to take another 6 months to actually roll out as well. So that ability to respond to this change in your environment is not there in Waterfall, which is there in Agile, because you are continuously developing over there rather than developing over a large period of time. So some terms that you'll often come across when you read Agile or if companies talk about Agile will be like Scrum, Safe, DSDM, Crystal, FDD, Lean, Kanban, XP. So Scrum is one of the popular ones, but essentially all of these different methodologies come under the Agile umbrella. Today we will be discussing Scrum, which is one of the popular and most used ones. So what is Scrum? So the typical elements of Scrum is that in a day-to-day working, every morning there will be a Scrum meeting. This meeting will be 15 minutes long at most. It should not extend to half an hour or an hour. It should be short. The idea of this meeting will be to catch up with all your developers. You could involve your designers if you wanted to, but the main stakeholders in this meeting will be the product manager who's driving things and the developers who are working on the product. What the developers do is they should focus on three things in their updates. First is, what did I do yesterday? What am I going to do today? and the third could be what is blocking me. And these kind of updates keep the product manager updated in terms of what is happening in code right now, how far progress has your developer made. All these updates should again be covered within 15 minutes itself. This is not supposed to be a discussion meeting. This is just supposed to be a meeting about updates, and this is supposed to happen every day, ideally in the morning. This is one of the typical elements of Scrum which is there. Scrum is also known as a stand-up meeting. So these are used synonymously. So if you ever see a company following approach where there's a stand-up meeting in the morning, it's likely following something like Scrum. There are some product artifacts which would be there. There's a backlog. Backlog would be the different ideas that you have collected of what you want to do in your product. For example, if I was Swiggy in the early stages, my backlog would have had, I want to add live tracking for riders. I want to add a tipping system for riders. I want to add a feedback rating system only for the riders and keep the restaurant rating separate. I want to add a feature where I can add UPI as a payment for, and so on and so on. Like, this backlog could be endless. This backlog can comprise of your own ideas, ideas from team members, ideas coming from your direct customers, or it could be ideas from your stakeholders. Or your backlog could simply comprise of bugs that you have not fixed, or it could be technical tasks that require being done to keep your product working optimally or not slowing down and crashing. So your backlog is going to comprise all these things. This is one product artifact. Your second artifact could be user stories. So user story is typically a statement which kind of defines what your feature ought to do. So for example, a user story for a tweet on Twitter could be, as a user, I would like to share a message. As a user, I would like dash, so I can do dash. That's the typical format of a user story. So you can kind of break down your feature into these small user stories and you can hand that over to your developer. Alternatively, you can come up with the entire document, which is known as a product requirements document. Product requirement document will cover what the feature is about, why you're making the feature, what are you achieving out of the feature, what are the different cases you have to handle, what are you supposed to do in different scenarios, and so on and so on. We'll take a look at the format of a PRD in the coming slides. Another element of Scrum is sprint planning. So before I talk about sprint planning, let's actually cover what a sprint is. A sprint is essentially a short time frame in which you want to get your product developed, tested, and then rolled out. A sprint is typically between 2 to 4 weeks. So that means 2 weeks to a month is when a sprint would, or how long a sprint would last. And towards the end of that sprint, you would be shipping or releasing some useful product. And in our case, if we are working on digital products, that means pushing an update to Play Store. So at the end of each sprint, there will be some new feature or new optimizations or bug fixes that will be going out as a release in App Store or Play Store. So now when we say sprint planning, that's essentially what is the work which will be done in those 2 weeks or 4 weeks? Like which task should the developer pick up? They're not going to look directly at the backlog and be like, okay, I have 100 tasks and I don't know which one to pick up. You as the product manager will prioritize which task is very important, and that task has to be planned for that sprint. And you're always going to have limited bandwidth. So for example, if you have a few developers, then your bandwidth is depending on their hours, right? Say it's 3 developers and they put in maybe, let's say, 8 hours every day or 40 hours a week. If we talk about a 2 week sprint, it's 80 hours. So for 3 developers, you have 240 hours of bandwidth, right? So if you have 240 hours of bandwidth, then you can't be unreasonable and assign 500 hours of tasks which are there. You have to plan this, that you have so many hours and only so many hours of work can be done from the backlog. So those are all the elements of sprint planning. In order to get estimates of how long a feature will take or a bug fix will take or a task will take, you can kind of get a ballpark estimate from your developer and use that during your sprint planning. Finally, after your sprint is done, you can review what are the different tasks that you actually picked up and shipped out, and what is the supposed impact you are expecting, or what is the output you expect out of the product which has been released. Lastly, you can do a retrospective of each sprint. You can think about, okay, I rolled out this improved login page in my last sprint, and I'm noticing that there's a improvement in the number of signups I'm getting. Maybe it's by 10%, 20%. So the thing we shipped in our last sprint, it was successful because it gave us a positive outcome. So you're kind of retrospecting on what was the outcome of that sprint that got over last time. Any questions here?
Sir, actually, I have a question regarding waterfall and agile method. So the thing is that I was thinking like, first people would follow waterfall method because they have like a lot of requirements. If I were to release an app on Play Store, I have a lot of requirements. It will take a lot of time for me. I'll develop and test it and then release it. And then after that, for updates, I guess maybe if we use Agile, I mean, like, I'm just thinking, like, I guess,
So
yeah.
think about it this way. Waterfall, you're planning to say you have 20 features, okay? And now let's imagine that there's one way to do it, which is agile, and there's one way to do it, which is waterfall. In waterfall, what will happen is you will take all your 20 features and you will develop them together, how much ever time it takes, and then you'll test them together, how much ever time it takes, and then finally you'll roll out 20 features together. In agile, you're not going to do that. In agile, you will probably pick the 4 to 5 most important features first. Then you'll work on releasing that. Mainly your core value proposition of whatever your product is, you'll work on first releasing that. That could take slightly long, but it's still not going to take as much as developing 20 features. It's probably going to take 1/4 the time or 1/10 the time, right? And gradually, with each coming sprint, you cross the list of different features which are there in your 20 features bucket. And finally, towards the end of the year, you might have rolled out everything, or you might extend that a little bit. But the point is that you didn't wait an entire year to deliver something to your customer. You just waited a few weeks or a few months.
Okay.
Also, sir, in sprint planning, so like, do we have to plan it for like the entire 20 features at first, or like every next sprint is only planned the next
Every
one?
next sprint is planned. So say I am in sprint 1 or 2 right now. Okay, I'm in sprint 2. So that means my developers are already working on tasks for sprint 2, right?
Correct.
They're already coding something. They've been given some features or bugs or tasks to work on. So now, while sprint 2 is running, I will do planning for sprint 3. So
Correct.
whenever sprint 2 gets over and the developers, their tasks are over, so whenever sprint 3 starts, because I have already planned what tasks I want to give them, they're ready to be given to the developers.
And meanwhile, within that sprint 3, supposedly the sprint 2 release has some or the other changes which are like important or priority. So
Hmm.
those are directly taken within that next sprint,
Yeah,
or
if
like it's
you
planned
have
for
the
sprint 4.
bandwidth, then you should pick it over there. And if it's important, then you'll have to reprioritize things.
Correct.
Prioritizing is one of, it's like you have to do it all the time. That's just how it is.
So
Be it in terms of what feature is picked or how much time you're putting into things. It could be anything.
like by default, we have to keep some bandwidth if something comes for the priority. Then
Yeah, like it depends. So my experience having worked with so many different product organizations, no one keeps bandwidth for unexpected things that have to be done. But on the fly, if we figure out that something needs to be done, then we deprioritize the item which was picked up in a sprint, and then we pick that up in the next sprint.
understood.
But one good approach for tackling stuff like tech debt or bugs and issues is keep 30% of your bandwidth only for that.
Okay.
So essentially, if like how we spoke in hours earlier, right? You have 80 hours from your developer in a sprint, in a 2 week sprint. And then you can allocate 30% of those 80 hours towards fixing bugs or technical tasks or optimizations.
Correct. Yeah. So 30% is somewhere like we keep that for these things, but
Yeah.
also suppose like there is random sickness or these things coming in, so all those increase
That
your
happens.
timeline. Then how do
Yeah.
you
Right.
those things handle in that?
That's always gonna happen and ruin your sprint planning. But those are unforeseen circumstances.
Got
So
it.
typically your sprint will get delayed or something might get what we call a spillover to a next sprint or delayed essentially.
Good. Also, so you just mentioned that during game development, you usually prefer the waterfall model over the agile one. Is that because the game one has like you can only ship it out to the users once all the features are done?
Typically in the case of AAA games, yes. AAA games will be games coming from your big studios. So
Okay.
something like a Call of Duty, Battlefield,
Halo.
or Forza,
Yeah.
Halo, those kind of games. Definitely, they have to wait till most of the game is ready.
Like
Got it. And
because
so
of the dependency, like things are dependent on each other, all the features. That's the reason.
It's a more complicated product if you think about it. Don't you think the time taken for developing a product like, say, a food tech application, which is listing restaurants,
Hmm.
creating a payment system, adding items to cart, very e-commerce like compared to a game. A game involves a lot of design, character design, map design, animations. It also involves a
Optimization.
storyline
Hmm.
and all those kind of things. It might even involve AI, which is there because you'll have
Right.
artificially
Bots, yeah.
intelligent characters
Hmm.
who will be interacting with the player. So it's hard to do this in small chunks. So you have to complete the thing.
And in
Got
that case, like planning happens at the beginning or on the fly also.
It's usually at the beginning, and obviously the estimates that they get they're never accurate. So there are always game delays which happen. So one big mess which happened recently is with this AAA game which came out in December called Cyberpunk 2077. So Keanu Reeves, if you guys have heard of that actor,
Yes.
Yeah.
he plays Neo in Matrix, like very popular. So anyway, he's there in that game. Like one character has been kind of made around him. So anyway, in that game, it was already delayed quite a bit. Finally, they released it in December, but there was a huge fiasco which happened because they rushed the release. So a lot of bugs came out. Also, one another issue which happened is that the game, even though it was rolled out for or sold for PS4, it performed really badly on PS4. So much so that these companies had to give refunds to all the people who bought that game.
Correct.
It's
Yeah.
one
Because
of the
this was the decade game which
worst,
was like
yeah,
marketed a lot.
yeah, it was one of the worst game launches ever in this decade.
it. So in that case, if any competitors release something similar or something, then you cannot stop, right? Because in the agile model, you can
Yeah,
develop or you can again go back to the board. Got it.
yeah. Games, it's very tricky because you
Very
even end
tricky.
up investing a lot of time.
Lot of
So
time.
completely
If
different
you go to
model.
see the storyline itself, the characters, the content, the animations, and all before
Yeah,
actual development and everything starts.
yeah, exactly. Even the modeling that they do of different
Hmm.
characters, they might have actual actors who are there, and they will be these scanners which capture the face
Hmm.
expressions and things.
Right. And then shadows,
It's
detailing, and
very,
everything.
yeah.
Vectors. Right.
Here's a small kind of comic that I would like you guys to go through. I'll quickly narrate it as well. How the customer explained it it seems like these steps kind of thing, which is supposed to be on a rope on a tree, and how the business consultant described it. He described a sofa, how the project leader understood it. There's only one step on that tree, and that can't go anywhere because it's gonna hit the tree trunk. How the analyst designed it, he cut off the tree trunk. How the programmer wrote it, the step is on the floor. Finally, what the beta testers received is they wanted to kill themselves. How it performed under load, the tree got burnt. How the project was documented, there was no documentation. How the customer was built for a damn roller coaster. When it was delivered, the tree lost its leaves and it was winter. How it was supported, there was no support. So this is kind of covering the importance of why it's important to not only understand what your customer really wants by doing a deep dive, but also documenting it very well. Because if you have less documentation and you're relying mostly on verbal cues of doing things, then a lot of information gets lost and it's not accessible. It might be buried in verbal conversations, it might be buried in a WhatsApp chat or a Slack chat, and then it's not accessible because it's hard to find that. So it's better to document all the feature related changes that you plan within your PRD or some kind of document. Speaking of that, let's take a dive into writing a product requirement document. So the typical constituents are you define purpose. So who is the feature going to be for? So for example, in Swiggy, they'll have two kinds of users, or maybe three kinds of users. They'll have the restaurants, they'll have the riders, and they'll have the customers or the users, right? So you identify which audience is the feature going to be rolled out for. Then why are you rolling out the feature? Like, what is the expected outcome? Are you expecting your users to order more food? Are you expecting your users to order more food in terms of, say, frequency in the day versus frequency in the month? What is your agenda behind the feature? Or are you expecting your users to adopt a new feature which is there? It could be around any goals that your company has. It depends on different companies. So as Netflix, I would want users to watch more content with me. So I'd like to increase the watch time perhaps. As Swiggy, I might want more food orders. As Uber, I might want more cab bookings, right? So you identify what's that purpose over there in the why statement. Then you describe how the feature will function. So say if I'm developing a feature in Netflix, which allows or the agenda is that users watch more content, then I would want to describe how the feature is functioning. So for example, if I wanted to launch the continue watching feature, then I would say that so whenever the user is watching content, we will send data about what duration of the content they have watched. So say if it's a 1 hour long TV show episode and they paused it or they were streaming it or they stopped it and the timestamp at that point of time was say 5 minutes and 20 seconds. So this piece of data, this needs to be delivered to the Netflix server. And then once Netflix server has that timestamp, it can actually create a continue watching section which is there, which will have a thumbnail of that particular TV show episode, along with the duration of how much content the user watched. So the user will be able to resume exactly at that point of time. So this is kind of the how the feature would work. Or if we take another example, say tracking Swiggy riders, right? So in that case, the how over there would be Swiggy riders will give location access to the Swiggy application. Swiggy application, which will keep giving orders to the Swiggy riders to collect and all that, will keep tracking the live location of the riders. And this live location of the riders will then be delivered to or shown to the end user who has placed an order, which is going to come from this rider. So that's the how of the live tracking feature for Swiggy. So that's typically how you would describe the how. That's like the meaty part because this is what your feature is going to do basically, how it's going to work. Then you can try setting a release criteria. You can say that, okay, I plan to release this in 2 weeks or 1 month or whatever the timeline is for your feature. If it's a small feature, you could probably do it in one sprint. If it's not, and it's not possible to break it in one sprint, then you could do it in two sprints perhaps. But you figure that out. You take your rough timing would be this rough estimate that you get from your developers of how long they're going to take. Release criteria is going to be what should be there in the feature. So, for example, if I say that as continue watching feature for Netflix, I at least wanted to cover TV show continue watching, if not movies. Or I can say that there are three different scenarios where continue watching will apply, right? Firstly, whenever the user is streaming content, it has to continuously tell Netflix what timestamp they have covered in the content. It can't be when the player is exited. It has to be continuous. So, am I covering that scenario where the user is pausing it? Am I covering the scenario where the user stops playing it? So, what should exactly go in this feature? Your feature could be huge. It could have 20 different things. But what is the criteria for your current release? Is it 4 out of these 20 things that you plan to ship out? And maybe the other items that you plan to ship out, they are going to be in a V2 or a V3 consecutive versions of the app which come out. So oftentimes what we do is we roll out a base kind of version of the feature we work on. And then we track the success of it, of this MVP which we have rolled out. And if it is successful, it is getting traction, then we think about working on a V2 or a V3 and improving that feature. So that would be your release criteria. Like, what are the different elements which you want to go in this release? Any questions on the constituents here?
Pankaj, sir, for example, the continue to watch again that feature. Okay,
Hmm.
so as you said that to implement that particular functionality too, there are a lot of corner cases to be taken care of. So, for
Yeah,
example, initially, if you just press the if I write a code that if someone is watching a video and he presses the back button, then you automatically save it the last
correct,
timestamp. But
correct.
suddenly, if the electricity goes, he just switches off the
So
television.
that is why I said that it has to
Yeah,
continuously send. Otherwise,
got it.
it won't work.
Hmm.
In those cases, it won't work. But in the back
Okay.
cases, the pause cases, those cases, it will work.
Got it.
Yeah.
So initially, how I used to think was that if there's a feature which we have to implement, we have to take into consideration all the uh, pros and means whatever the test cases are for that feature, and then implement all those in one go so that the feature is like 100% delivered that feature.
No,
But now,
but it is possible to deliver like some parts of it, right? And you can
hmm,
gradually
hmm,
improve on it because
gradually
you get feedback faster.
got it. So in this case, if the normal flow also of your video watching thing was going back, and obviously then at that time you wouldn't have automatically saved that continuation point. Only if the user would have paused it, and then it would have gotten saved earlier in your early version. So
Hmm.
how would you actually track that whether this feature is getting used or is useful for a user? The continue to watch one.
By the number of clicks on continue watching.
Okay, but then
So
there is no at
continue
all.
watching is a section, right? Which will
Acha,
come in
okay,
the
that
home
section
screen.
you're talking about. Okay, okay.
Yeah,
Now I get. Right. So how many people actually interacting and you
right.
watching those clips?
I
Fine.
would check how many clicks is continue watching getting out of the
Hmm.
people who actually start continue watching.
Hmm.
How many percentage of those users complete that particular episode or movie? So
Hmm.
maybe it's possible that people drop again. But these are different success metrics that you can track around it.
Right. Got it. Because if YouTube, if you notice, there's no continue to watching specific thing. You have
But
to go.
they do allow you to resume.
Yeah. You
So
can.
yeah,
Right. You can
they
go to a
save
history
that.
also, and you can
Yeah,
resume that point. Right.
yeah. It's a very hygiene feature now, if you think about it. It's there in all media applications.
Hmm. Right.
But when it came out, it was new. It was innovative at that point of time.
And nowadays they have made sections also for one long video. So this is the intro part. This is the features, whatever.
Yeah,
So that the user, if he wants to skip to the particular
right,
thing or part of the video, he can easily.
right.
Uh,
Someone else was also asking something. Yeah.
Sir, actually, we were talking about this continue watching thing, right? So, I mean, while you're testing ki, like, are people dropping out or not, the data you're taking can be wrong also at times. I mean, like, I feel like, because, certain TV shows might not have that interest, like,
Yeah, so don't rely only on quantitative feedback, also rely on qualitative feedback. That's the best approach to always take.
or can we do something like, the best, or can we just segregate the data itself? Like, we already know that this TV show is watched a lot, but
Hmm.
like we want to test this functionality in this one. Then we'll know ki, like how many, or like will it give a wrong result?
So you're saying you would launch continue watching only for one TV show versus
No,
for
no,
all TV shows?
while testing to know proper results.
While testing what?
No, I was just saying that continue watching feature is there. No, we want people to click it or we want them to use it. But
Right.
sometimes our data can give wrong result also, because I mean, like, it's not our fault, but because the TV show is not that interesting enough.
So you're saying there could be drop-offs when someone does the continue watching or plays something from there because of low interest in the TV show itself.
Yes, I mean, like, there can
That
be
is a
other
possibility.
circumstances which is not our fault.
Yeah, absolutely. But again, you will be probably looking at the averages, right? And then you would get at least a understanding of, on an average, how is this feature doing. Also, at the same
Okay.
time, you'll get the number of clicks holistically on continue watching. That is also going to act as a metric that you will look at.
I mean, I was just thinking, maybe this other non-interesting TV show data would change the whole scenario, or like,
But if it's a non-interesting TV show, then isn't it likely that a smaller subset of your entire base would be actually watching it? And then it won't be able to skew your average so much.
okay.
Because you have other normal TV shows which have, let's say, average interest as well, right? So if you have a large database from this, it's unlikely your data will get skewed because of one poor TV show. Because you're kind of getting the results or data from all the TV shows which are being watched.
Okay. Okay.
But you can always measure in continue watching which is the most successful show and all those things. But your thing to track here should itself be the success of continue watching.
Yeah.
So here we have a template of a PRD. This template has been made by a company or website called producthunt.com, if you guys have heard of that. So they're following the same template which I described earlier. First, they will describe who it's for, who's the end user of the product. So taking that Swiggy example, is it the restaurant, the rider, or the user? You note that here. Why do you want to build it? Like, is there a goal you have? You want to increase your, say, monthly active users, or you want to improve the retention of your users, or you want to maybe improve the watch time in case of Netflix? It could be anything. What is your success outcome that you're expecting? What is it? So you're going to describe what all is going to be included over here. So in this case, the template that you're looking at now, this is a PRD of Product Hunt itself, the website. So that's why it's going quite deep over here if you think about it. They're talking that producthunt.com will be used by product people, it will be used by investors, it will be used by tech consumers. Why build it? Because they've seen that Linky Dink MVP got good traction, community verticals are on the rise. This was all their reasoning on why they wanted to build it. Finally, what are the different features that they're thinking of? There's going to be a post, there's going to be a comment, there's going to be a reply, vote, index view, etc. And user types will be non-registered viewers and registered viewers. So here you're describing your features. And now this is an in-depth, let's say, written description of what the feature is supposed to do. So if we take a look at index view, homepage, it's going to display the lists of posts chronologically segmented by day. So you have covered a few important things over here. You have mentioned that the posts will be displayed over there. That's one thing. And you have mentioned that these will be chronologically listed over there. So the newest one will be on top. Now, say you missed out this detail of how the post will be listed in terms of, is the newest one going to be on top, or is the oldest one going to be on top, or is the one with the highest number of clicks going to be on top, or is it that it's going to be a random order? Like, what is your expectation out of the feature? That is something that you should note down over here. So say in case you missed this piece of detail on what should be the order of posts coming over there, then typically your developer might not add that ordering at all. And what that homepage will end up looking like when you test it, the posts are going to be in a random order. Which is why it's important to actually specify each aspect of your feature. So nothing is left to the mercy of the developer. Let me put it that way. And it's more in line with what you are visioning for that feature. Any questions on this PRD?
No, sir.
Sir, can we include wireframes or any other thing like the product manager's vision, you know?
So you should include, at this point, if you're writing a PRD, you should actually include mockups or interactive prototypes, which you would have designed with your designers. And you should drop in links of that in the description section of each feature.
Okay, okay.
So see, even in terms of tech, right? Your PRD could be viewed by the front-end developer and it could be viewed by the back-end developer. To the back-end developer, he is not concerned much with design, but the front-end developer will be very concerned with design. So it's good that your PRD is acting like a Bible and it has all the resources that that front-end developer might need, including design.
Before assigning the work to developer, it's better to, I mean, like, it's the job of the product manager to sit with the designer and turn his wireframe into interactive mockups.
Absolutely.
And then, okay, then the vision becomes clear for them.
Yeah. So see, when you're doing sprint planning, right? Say sprint 2 is ongoing and you need to come up with features or tasks for sprint 3, say, which is 2 weeks away because your sprint just started. Sprint 2 has just started. So now in these 2 weeks, what you ought to do is you will have to figure out any wireframes or features that you had planned. These features need to be designed in mockups. You need to get feedback on those mockups and iterate, make different iterations, versions of it. Finally, when everyone is happy, you make a full-fledged mockup or an interactive prototype. Once that is available, you can even work on your PRD. So you have 2 weeks to do this so that when the next sprint starts, you are ready with the design and the PRD to be given to the developer. So you are always one sprint ahead of the developers.
Okay, I guess the developer has to just code it, and like the product manager has to, product manager and the designer have to say where the placing goes. Like, okay, this
Yeah,
feature is here.
you can
And
always include your developers in feedbacks, discussions, and all those things as well. It's good. They would feel empowered.
okay,
Like
Uh,
I would actually insist you do that because otherwise developers feel a bit excluded from these things. So
mm.
it's nice and motivating to include them. Yeah,
Pankaj, sir, if there is this application, so first, what I feel initially is that uh, what you said that a particular sprint only should be planned, and then later on of that planning should be explained to the developer, and then during their
right,
development you have to plan for the next one. But
right.
in that case, if a certain part of that feature, for example, the button of the of accessing that feature is in the previous screen or the previous sprint,
Hmm.
so then you might have to take it up on the next one, obviously, and tell them, okay, you have to again make these changes over here and
Yeah,
organize them. So,
that is fine.
would you suggest that first you should at least have the basic flow of or the basic idea of the entire application, and then later on you go in for the designing of only one part or section of it, for example, login, which is your first sprint, and then after that is during that is being developed, then you go in for the proper designs for the next modules.
So you're saying you kind of make a bare bones login page, and then later you work on the design of the login page. So you
Yeah,
focus
not
on the
only
flow
the
and
bare.
then pick the design later.
Yeah, so for example, the flow of the entire application. For example, let's take a Cuckoo FM only. So I've got this idea. Okay. So now from the login page to whatever point of features I want to include. Okay, I have the list of features. I'll just incorporate that like normal pen paper designs or wireframes. Okay. And then when actual development has to start, I take this particular part, the starting part, for example, the login sign up or registration. We get those designs made, and after those final designs are made, then we start with the sprint, the first sprint. And then during the first sprint is going on, you take up the next part, which is the actual podcast list.
So whatever is not being worked on in a sprint, you can get that designed during that sprint. That's fine.
Ah, okay, but initially, like, should you do that practice in which you entire flow of the application mapped out first?
So you would figure out what are the features. If it's a new product, you would figure out what are the core features you would need for this new product to function, right? So you might need something like a login page.
Right.
You might need something which is the core value proposition. If it's an
Hmm.
e-commerce app, that would be a item inventory with a checkout process, a payment process, a add to cart process, and these things. So then you would focus on getting the designs of all these ready and then picking it up.
Got it. Got it. Got it.
But I don't know if you meant to ask this, but try not to ship something and then again working on the design and again shipping it. If you can get the design done for that beforehand, then you should ship with that and do the redesigning
My
much
part was
later.
that instead of like making the final designs on the mockups with the designer for the entire application first, you just
You
go.
don't need to do the entire
Yeah.
application. Just do it for the features which will be picked in your immediate sprint.
Right, right, right. But before that, if you can just have the flow or the wireframes normal for the entire flow of the application, so you know after the entire design and development, you're going to get something which has all these features in like these features are there.
That can be done. Yeah, that's okay. So whenever your product update or say version or product is being rolled out, you have to set some release criteria. So for example, what are the different functions which will be there? So if we talk about that continue watching example, it's essentially one function, right? That on clicking the continue watching section video, it should resume from the point where the user had dropped off previously. So this is essential for that feature. This function has to be there. But it could be possible that your feature itself has a few different functionalities. So in that case, you define what functionalities are essential for the release, without which it cannot go or it's incomplete. Maybe it's possible that, say, you click on continue watching, and instead of resuming the show that the user left last time, it simply takes you to a list of the shows that have been watched before. So then that feature is incomplete because it's not directly playing the video like it's supposed to. Another criteria could be usability. So is the feature usable? Like, can a user who's interacting with the feature actually understand what is happening or how to use it or learn how to use it on their own? Or are there some glitches happening in the usability? Like people aren't able to figure out how to use it. There's a huge learning curve. It's complex to understand or something like that. If that's the case, then again, you can set a criteria that it should be usable enough so it's simple to understand and someone can do it. One criteria could be reliability. Reliability essentially means that if someone, let's continue with that continue watching example. If someone clicks on that continue watching, say, thumbnail of content, then 100 out of 100 times, the video which comes consecutively after that step should be resuming from the point where the user left. Instead of, say, a glitch where maybe 1 out of 100 times clicking on that thumbnail, it's not resuming from the point where the user left it, but it's starting from the start of the video. That's a glitch. That's a reliability issue. So you need to think on that as well. How acceptable is 1 out of 100 to you if the feature is rolling out? Performance would be something like if 100 out of 100 users are using your continue watching feature together, does it work? Or does it become slow because there are so many users using it? This is mostly a question of scale. Are your servers performing fast, or are there slowdowns which are happening because of the load that's happening? Finally, supportability. So, which is what are the different things that you plan to support after the rollout in terms of bugs and fixes? Like which aspects would you cover, or can it be even supported, and so on and so forth. Any questions on this?
No, sir.
Okay. So oftentimes, because you're the go-to person for the product, what's going to happen is that all the stakeholders are going to come to you and ask you, when is X going to come out? Because you are managing the release, you are assigning this task in the sprint, you are overlooking what is going on in the sprint, and finally you carry out the execution or delivery of that feature to Play Store. So your senior stakeholders might come, your CEO might come, your head of product might come, someone from marketing might ask for the feature, someone from sales might ask for a feature. So it's always important that whatever task you're picking up, you have discussed it with your developers and you have a rough understanding of how long that feature will take. So you can then give an estimate to someone who's asking you. Ideally, you should add some buffer to that estimate also, because typically there are delays which happen. It's tough to get things done strictly in time. And also these estimates can then go in your PRD as well. If there are things that are blocking your developers, which is kind of increasing the timeline that they need, then figure out how you can resolve these blockers. Blockers are things which will slow them down or something which is blocking progress. So you kind of figure out how you can resolve them or help them out. Like, is there a meeting which needs to be set up with a different team in order to resolve this issue? Or what is it? It could be any kind of problem that you might be facing during development. Give me one moment. Okay. Let's take a look at product roadmap now. So APMs probably would not have to deal with this thing, but at a PM, SPM level, head of product level, what usually happens is that your senior stakeholders will tell you, okay, so what's your plan for the product for the rest of the year? And then you need to prepare a roadmap. Like, what are you planning to deliver in different quarters for your product? What are the different features which will go out in each quarter? So that's what we refer to as product roadmap. It's a roadmap of the different features which will get rolled out consecutively in each quarter. So taking a look at the example over here, how they've designed this roadmap, they've split it into quarters and they also split it into different products. So here there's Air wireless headphones. So they said that in Q1 they will prep for the release, they will analyze competitive products, they'll build marketing and project timelines. Finally, in Q4 they are launching the product. But they are dividing all the different tasks which are there in different quarters. Similarly, if we look at Air Lens 2, it's collecting feedback from product 1.0, planning budget, timeline. And it's possible that some tasks take 2 quarters. It's possible that some tasks take 1 quarter, but you have to kind of show this or illustrate this by means of a roadmap. So this is like one style of a roadmap. There could be another style as well. This is what we call a Gantt chart, right? So you can have bars which kind of have a description of what the task or feature is, and then you can drag it across quarters. So for example, this iOS development V2, as you can see, It's starting in Q2, but it's extending to Q3. But I can visibly see and understand that it's gonna start in Q2 and then extend to Q3. So you can use a Gantt chart type of approach as well to make your roadmap. You can use Excel, you can use PowerPoint, you can use anything which has some kind of graphical abilities. Here, what they've done is they've broken different aspects rather than different products. So mobile app is one aspect of theirs, right? It's going to have iOS development and Android development. Customer dashboard could maybe be their web side of the product. So again, they're doing MVP, V2, and so on and so forth. So this is again another example. Any questions on this? Either roadmap.
No, sir.
It's not that complex actually. If you already have a strategic vision for your product, then you can plan out a roadmap. So let's take an example. Signal recently become very popular, right? And until a few days back, even the group functionality of Signal was quite limited. And there were groups which got upgraded and so on and so forth. And even if you do a 1:1 comparison with WhatsApp, Signal is still lacking a lot of features. So Signal's product manager will kind of make a roadmap. These are the different features that I plan to add in each quarter. And that's what he will show the senior team. So they can then trust him to carry out the execution and plan the sprints, and so on and so forth. It's not necessary that your roadmap needs to have concrete features with that which are there, but it can have some objectives which are there. So in this case, if you look at it, these are objectives over here, right? Doing user research and design. This is not a feature. Similarly, MVP development, this is not a direct feature. It's more on a high level objective basis. Cool. So coming to something that I spoke about early in this session, I mentioned that you'll have a product backlog and that's going to have a lot of tasks. Because everyone's going to keep telling you that, hey, why don't you add this feature? Why don't you add this feature? Your customers are going to tell you, your team is going to tell you, your marketing team, sales team, R&D team, senior stakeholders might tell you. You might have your own ideas as well. All of these need to be collected somewhere, and that's called your product backlog. But you can't pick everything because you'll never have the bandwidth to pick everything. You'll never have so many developers. You're going to have a limited number of developers and a limited number of hours to carry out things. So then how do you figure out which task to pick up? So obviously you will be aligned with your company in terms of what is important for your company at that moment. But there are also some prioritization techniques that you can use. So we're going to cover three of the popular techniques here, starting with Moscow. Moscow is an acronym. Essentially, it means must have, should have, could have, and won't have. So in your feature or in your sprint, you figure out what are the must-have things that we have to pick up from the backlog. Maybe it's a very important, super critical bug fix which is there, which is kind of troubling a lot of your users. Then you might want to put that in the must-have bucket. Then there could be a design change that you've done for maybe some screen which you have. But that design screen is not so important because it may or may not add concrete value in terms of let's say company objectives. It may not increase your user base or the number of hours of content they're watching or any of the core value propositions that they're using in your app. So something like this could be in a could have bucket, or you could even put it in a won't have bucket depending on your priority. So what you're doing is you are bucketing things, and then accordingly what happens is the must have and should have items will get the highest priority that sprint. Could have, it depends. If there's some remaining time which is left, your developers can pick that up, but the won't have items will absolutely not get picked up. And there is some clarity which is established in what is to be absolutely done in that sprint? Like what can that sprint be? What will make that sprint incomplete if that task is not done? That kind of resides in your must have and should have buckets. So very simple technique, but it helps you prioritize things. Because as a product manager, you would want to do 100 things, but you can never really do all of them. You always need to figure out which are your like important or essential items. Any questions on Moscow?
So the must-have ones you explained that the errors and all what are really buggy or something, those features should go. Should have would be the features which are
No,
in
no, no.
pipeline.
It doesn't just need to be. I just give an example of a very
Okay,
critical bug is something that one is very likely to include.
right.
But it's also possible that you have a really kick-ass feature idea, which is that which you really want to roll out because you
Hmm,
feel
hmm,
that it's going to deliver immediate impact to
hmm,
your application or product. Then you
hmm,
can put that in the must-have bucket as well. But say now that particular feature that you're talking about, right? You or your designer planned out this amazing animation which is there in this product, but your
hmm,
developer is saying that that animation itself will take 3 days. So now that you will figure out, maybe I want to put that and won't have this time.
got it.
So you kind
Because
of break it
hmm,
into small things.
because I was little unclear about the differentiation between should have, could have, and must have. Like
Yeah.
exactly what would go in those buckets.
Think of could have as if there is remaining time left in your sprint, then this is something which
Hmm,
can be picked up, but it's
right.
not a priority.
Hmm.
And won't have your clear cut saying that this is
It's
not
not
going to
going
be
to be
picked
done.
up.
Right.
Yeah.
Got it.
And even here itself, there is some level of prioritization happening. Say you divided items into must have and should have, okay? Maybe I put my bug fix in must have. I also put my new, say, feature in must have.
Hmm.
And then I put a second feature in should have, which I also think is very important. But
Right.
I didn't think it's as important as the first feature, which is in must have.
Right.
Now, while development, it turns out that your must have items itself will take the entire sprint. But because
Oh,
priority has already been established, the feature which was and should have will not get picked up because there's no
okay.
time to do it. And it'll end up going in the next sprint.
Got it. Got it.
So it's to kind of tackle with uncertainty, if you think about it.
Got it. Right. So at least we know that okay, if this thing is not done, so at this point of time, then let the sprint go.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is another prioritization technique. It's called lean. It's very easy to use and it's very effective also. So how it works is you figure out what are your high value items or low value items and how much effort they're going to take. So say, what's an example I can give you? Okay, imagine that Netflix is going to come out with VR content. So if you have a VR headset, then people can use that VR headset and then watch content in VR, right? So now this is a high effort item, but is it going to apply to most of your user base? No, it because there's a hardware limitation. Only people with VR headsets can actually use this feature. So then you're bucketing it into, let's say, low value and high effort. And then that's your answer. You won't pick this up. Now imagine the flip side. You figure out a feature where maybe a social system for Netflix where people can leave reviews or something. So that's not as high effort as a VR feature, right? So you could probably put it in low effort. But is it going to deliver high value, adding a social system in terms of reviewing and all? It might. I would bet it that it might. So then I can add it over here. Similarly, you are bucketing different things based on how much effort they're going to take and how much value they're going to deliver. And what ends up being your, say, highlight or star over here is things which require low effort and deliver high value. We call these low hanging fruits. because they're going to take less time to be made, but they're going to deliver high value. So this is something that you would pick up compared to a high value item, but which is delivering, say, which is taking a lot of effort. Any questions on this, or you guys find it simple to understand?
Yes,
It's
sir.
simple to understand.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. If something is low value and low effort, then you may or may not pick it. Depends on the urgency of it. But if something is high value and low effort, that's actually rewarding, right? Because you are putting low effort into it, but the outcome which is being delivered via that product is much more. So then you would be inclined to prioritize this. The third way to prioritize is known as story mapping, which is what you are looking at over here. Essentially, you create that you create these columns of different, say, features or aspects of your feature. In this case, they've covered different features of the product. So they have a sign up, they have a product page, they have a search page, they have a checkout page. Okay, so here you also add cards below the feature. Like, what are the different things which will be involved in that feature? So if we talk about a product page, it's gonna have reviews, it's gonna have a media gallery, which is like pictures of that product itself. It's gonna have a description. So now in this, whatever's on top will be highest priority, and that will get picked first. So whenever that particular task is done, you can start the second one. So that is how you're prioritizing it. You've made the entire story in kind of these columns, and then whatever's on top gets the max priority and it gets picked first. Instead of it being in a haywire key, product page is gonna have reviews, it's gonna have media gallery, it's gonna have description without any assigned priority. You assign the priority in the column level itself. Any questions?
No, sir.
Okay. So as mentioned before, a sprint is typically 2 to 4 weeks long. In my experience, it depends from company to company. Startup I was working with 4 years back, we were delivering every day. And we did not have a user base when we started out because we had rolled out the product from scratch. Then we could afford to release something every day. But at the same time, when we did start getting users, we moved to a 2 week sprint. 2 week sprints are very common. Even my current company, we are doing 2 week sprints. But in Geo, we had a month long sprint. The organization is large, even the testing process takes time. So we had a month to actually get everything done. Some companies even rely or use a 1 week sprint, but I find it too short of a time to do a lot of things. So you can figure out what works best for you and then go and implement that in the organization that you work in. Whatever ends up being a part of your sprint will be from your roadmap or product backlog. So what does a sprint look like? When a sprint has started, that is. Day one, you will be handing over the design and the PRD or the specifications to your developers. Then you can have a discussion with them. They can ask you questions about it. You can answer them. If they have any doubts, you can clear them. Also, the developers can think more on it. If there are different cases they can think of, or they can come up with the estimate of how long it will take. Or maybe you've already discussed the estimate. It depends on how you're doing it. But the first day of your sprint will be when you actually hand over the design and the specs which are to be done. From day to day 7, it's going to be development in which your developers are actually coding out the product itself or making the product. Day 8 to 9 will involve testing. So it could be you as the product manager who's doing the testing, which is there. It could be possible that there's a QA who's doing the testing. Then during this testing, you might figure out there are different bugs which are there. You will report these bugs back to your developers. They'll roll out fixes for it, and then you'll confirm the fixes are there. And then finally, you will release it. So one thing to note over here, even though I'm saying 2 weeks, the days here are 10. The reason is because I've accounted for weekends as well. If you include that, then you only have 10 days of working days which are there in 2 weeks. Any questions on the sprint cycle?
No, sir.
No, sir.
What are some tools that you can use to maintain backlogs? So some examples I've given here, there are obviously many more. There's Trello, which is something you can get started with it for free. There's Jira, there's Excel, there's Redmine, there's Pivotal Tracker. There are many tools that you can actually use. I'm quickly going to show you what Trello looks like. Have any of you tried Trello before?
Yeah, I did.
Okay. What about the
So for
others?
like what we use is we used to use our task for marketing and then for data team.
Okay, understood. I have to figure out the login for this. Let's see. Do I have it? Do I have it? Yes. Let's take a look at this book of flight thing. So if you can see what I've done over here, I've added user stories in different features of my product. Search for a flight is feature, search results is a feature, flight booking is another feature, payment is a feature, and so on. And I've accumulated all these ideas over here. These are different boards that Trello allows you to keep. And you can always add items here, you can edit them. You can add pictures inside the card if you want. You can label them with things. Similarly, if you wanted to, you can even set up a backlog or a ongoing sprint progress kind of thing. So check this out. This is for again flight booking thing only. Here, I have maintained a backlog in my leftmost column where I've mentioned the different kind of features that I want to pick up. Then over here, I kind of have the different statuses which are there. So picked up is what is in development right now, then what is in testing, then what actually got completed, and finally, what is the feature that I measured the outcome for. So this is the kind of thing that you can pull with Trello. You can maintain your backlog over here and you can detail out something if you wanted to. Let me show you guys Jira as well.
Have
Give
you
me
checked
one
out the
moment.
butler feature of Trello?
It's been a while since I used it actually. I'm only
Okay.
using Jira now. What is the butler feature?
I'm also not too sure. I think I'd used it before, but actually I wanted you to show it, so I don't remember it. It's
Yeah, I
just you have to press
can.
that bell button and it rearranges the cards according to the dates or something like that.
Okay. Even there are ways where you can connect your Trello boards to different boards. There are like Trello has a lot of different plugins, and I've not explored all of them. Okay, wait. I'm going to show you guys what a Jira system looks like. Give me one moment. Cool. Sharing my screen. So in Jira, you can create what we call as issues, but these issues can be bugs, it can be tasks, it can be features, it could be anything that you wanted. You can add like a title for it, which is called summary. Then you can have a description for it, which kind of gets into the what, why, how, who's going to use it, so on and so forth. You can even add the links for your design over here. Or if you wanted, you can directly attach images for your mockups over here. You can assign it to people from the assignee drop down, or you can assign it to yourself. You can add some labels on it. Like if you want to have a neater system, you can probably label out different features that are related to different aspects. For example, if I'm working on the media player feature, I would label it as media player. Or if I'm working on the login or registration side, I can label it as login. And then different tasks will be available to you if you have set up a board like this. So it'll be similar to what we saw in Trello. You'll have a board over here which will show in progress, to do, and you can drag these. So 1 second. Yeah. The reason why Jira ends up being preferred, at least by me, is that I prefer the view of Jira more than Trello. So even though Trello has a nice board where you can do these things, like you can, it's giving you similar features. Like you can assign different people to each of the tasks here as well. You can add labels here, you can add descriptions, all those things. But this view, right here, what I'm showing you right now, this pop-up which is there, it's only able to convey a limited amount of information together. So not more than, and it's not easy to look at for your eyes or to when it comes to reading versus a entire full screen page. It's not saving. But yeah, I would urge you guys to at least try out Trello, Pivotal Tracker. These are free tools. You can even keep your backlog in Excel. But the problem which usually happens there is Excel will be local to your machine. So there's no maybe transparency on how you are managing your backlog. Trello or Google Sheet is a better way to do it because other people can access it and they'll see a live view of how you have assigned or prioritized different tasks. Or even if you use something like Trello, where you are assigning people, or if you use Jira, where you are assigning people, your team members to tasks, your different developers to specific tasks, then after you assign them, they get a notification that they got assigned a task. So that's why it's much better than using something like Excel. Could be an email notification or a push notification, something like that. Your Jira backlog, if you're not looking at it in columns of boards and you look at it holistically, it can look something like this. These are all the open tasks which are there in the sample project here. There's one task which is Wi-Fi not working. They've made random tasks over here. Some of these have assigned people, some of them are unassigned. All of them have different statuses which are there. This is a sample Jira ticket or task which has been opened. They've added the description here. So this is what I meant. You get a lot more screen real estate and are able to look at a lot more information together compared to Trello. Because Trello is limited to that pop-up, so it makes things a bit cumbersome. You can add a priority to your task. So for example, if it's a very critical bug fix, you can mark that as high priority. Or if it's a feature which you want to keep on high priority, that can be high. But say you discover a typo in the copy in your application somewhere, that would be something which is kind of low priority, and then you can mark it so. You can mark it as low priority. So yeah, any questions on Jira or these tools?
No, sir.
Pankaj sir,
Yeah,
yeah, is Jira a product of Atlassian?
Atlassian Suite. Trello is also Atlassian Suite.
Okay.
Atlassian is one of the best B2B companies.
Oh,
Like they have this integration with Microsoft Teams and everything, and it's like way easy to directly just create the tags.
Yeah, they have integrations with everything. Even Slack, they have integrations.
Correct, yeah.
They even have something called Confluence, which you can link up with your Jira. You can write your PRDs in Confluence, and then that can come to Jira. But Jira is limited in the sense that if you really want to use it, you need a paid account if your team is a bit large. Otherwise, you're not going to get much value.
Correct.
But if you guys are in a situation where you want to use something like Jira, but you can't afford Jira, then you can look at something called Redmine, which is very similar to Jira, but it's something that's open source. So you can simply take that code and host it on your own server and then use that.
Got
It's
it.
called being scrappy. So you're getting it for free.
We generally were using the GitLab
I
listening
have
Yeah,
used
section
GitLab as well.
for all
Yeah,
the development tests.
that's not bad. That's
Yeah.
also a decent backlog tracking or task tracking tool. It's fine.
user stories, bugs, and everything is present over there. So
Yeah, GitLab is nice.
Everything is integrated by everything, right? But it's not integrated by the human mind. अगर वो भी हो जाता तो कितना आसान रहता.
Yeah, I think that's gonna happen in another 5-10 years.
Neuralink कर रहा है ना, I guess. They are doing something to that.
Pankaj sir, what we were talking about, like right now, we want to go for a side project, right? And we want to develop something related to कौन सा तो ऐप था guys? Snaptube क्या क्या नाम था उसका?
Snare chat,
Share
share
chat,
chat.
share chat, right? So I think like we going to have resources or something. We're going to be arranging resources, and we can do something related to the side project, and we can build it out because there's a lot of guys who are currently into the cohort and they just want to do a side project. So what's your idea on share chat? आपने यूज किया है शेयर चैट? क्या शेयर चैट ही है, हाँ शेयर चैट है.
यार मैंने glance तो किया है, but didn't go too deep into it.
Such a good app, sir. You need
It
to
has mad traction. I know. There's
uh,
even a cross of the users of ShareChat and maybe Coco FM. I
I
would say.
think I think they already have like raised around more than 1,000 CRs. More than
Yeah,
1,000 CR.
they're very big.
Now you could imagine that how big they are. Like they have already raised 1,000 CRs. Like करेंगे कितने पैसों का? So right now what we are planning to do is we can do with some kind of a side project with uh some of you guys, and we can develop maybe similar to something called ShareChat, and I can go for, you can just guys can do the development and some and product management, and I can go for raising funds. That's something which is on me. So if you are interested guys, let's do then, right? I going to share the also I going to share the proper detail and everything with you all, and you can actually can fill up your details if you are interested to do some kind of side project. We are more than happy to take you forward, bro. ठीक है. On that note, पंकज सर आपके पास 15 मिनट हैं क्या?
Huh.
है ना? So on that note, guys, we are wrapping up the session. We're going to be have a personal discussion with Pankaj sir. I hope you guys liked it. And also, we are planning to do something very, very good. In that term, we can actually can give you, provide you with the regular sessions, or maybe we can do something on a regular basis. So stay tuned, stay safe, take care. Shampak here. Sunday वैसे ही है. Take care, guys.
Bye. Bye, guys.
Bye,
Okay,
Ali.
guys.
Bye,
Bye.
bye, Priyam. Bye,
bye,
Shweta.
bye,
Bye,
sir.
guys. Good night.
Shripad, bye. Shripad,
Good
bye.
night.
Yeah,
Shripad, अब
bye.
आप आयो. Bye.
Yeah, bye.
Shripad, bye.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Shripa. Thank you. Thank you. Let me close the recording now.